Welcome to a deep dive into the world of ancient Greek philosophy.
Sounds fun.
Today, we're going to explore the life and ideas of Cratylus.
Oh, cool.
Now, you might not be familiar with him,
Yeah.
but trust me, his ideas are fascinating.
Okay.
And they were way ahead of their time.
Wow.
So picture ancient Athens, a bustling hub of intellectual activity,
Okay.
where philosophers were debating and shaping the course of Western thought.
Yeah.
Cratylus was right in the thick of it, a follower of the famous philosopher Heraclitus,
Okay.
who you might know for his saying, "You can't step into the same river twice."
That's right. Heraclitus was all about constant change, the
Yeah.
idea that everything is in flux.
Yeah.
But Cratylus, well, he took this concept and pushed it to an even more radical extreme,
Oh, wow.
which is fascinating because it raises the question, how do you even go further than the idea that everything is constantly changing?
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's almost like saying, hold my Heraclean beer, I'm about to blow your mind with how much change there really is. So who was this Cratylus guy? Was he like Socrates' best friend, debating philosophy in the marketplace?
He was indeed an Athenian philosopher,
Okay.
active during the mid to late 5th century BC,
Okay.
right alongside Socrates
Yeah.
and other prominent figures. Even his birth date is a bit of a mystery.
Oh, right.
Some scholars believe he was around Plato's age, while others place him closer to Socrates' generation. It's remarkable how much of history is about piecing together these fragmented bits of information.
Yeah, it really is like trying to solve a giant philosophical jigsaw puzzle.
It is.
Speaking of Plato, wasn't he a student of Socrates?
Yes,
What's the connection to Cratylus in all of this?
you're right.
Okay.
Plato eventually became a dedicated student of Socrates.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Before he met Socrates, Plato was actually drawn to Cratylus in his teachings.
Oh.
This really highlights the dynamic intellectual environment of ancient Athens. Philosophers weren't just isolated figures, they were interacting, debating, and influencing each other's ideas, leading to the birth of new schools of thought.
Okay, so we've got this intellectual melting pot in ancient Athens.
Yeah.
And Cratylus is in the mix, pushing Heraclitus' ideas about change to a whole new level.
Totally.
So let's talk about that whole new level. Heraclitus said, you can't step into the same river twice. What did Cratylus say that was even more radical?
Well, prepare to have your mind bent a little.
Okay.
Cratylus argued that you couldn't even step into the same river once.
Wow.
Think about that for a moment. Heraclitus focused on the change that happens between two moments. Cratylus took it further,
Okay.
claiming that the river and everything else is changing continuously, even within a single instant.
Okay, that is definitely some next level thinking. It almost makes me think about modern physics.
Oh, yeah.
How we now know that things are constantly in motion at a subatomic level. It's like he was intuitively tapping into a concept that science would later confirm centuries later.
That's a great connection. It shows how ancient philosophical ideas can sometimes foreshadow scientific discoveries. What's fascinating here is that Cratylus' idea forces us to reconsider our perception of reality. If everything is in constant flux, if nothing truly stays the same, what does that mean for how we understand the world,
Right.
our own identities, even the nature of knowledge itself?
It's a total mind bender.
It is.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
But also incredibly thought-provoking.
Yeah.
So what happened to Cratylus and his radical ideas? Did they just fade away, or did they leave a mark on the history of philosophy?
His ideas may have seemed extreme to some,
Sure.
but they definitely didn't disappear. In fact, there's a modern school of thought called Cratylism,
Really?
which takes direct inspiration from his theories on language and the concept of flux.
Wait, Cratylism?
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah.
And people are still engaging with these ideas today.
They are.
Tell me more.
It's a fascinating example of how ancient ideas can find new life in contemporary thought. Cratylism delves into the relationship between words and their meanings,
Okay.
arguing that language, just like the world it describes, is in a constant state of evolution.
So it's not just the river that's changing, it's the word river itself.
Yeah.
That's blowing my mind a little bit. It makes you really think differently about the words we use every day and how their meanings might be shifting even as we speak.
Precisely. Cratylus' ideas challenge us to question our assumptions about language and the way we communicate. What we might perceive as fixed definitions are actually in constant flux, mirroring the dynamic nature of reality itself.
This is giving me a serious aha moment. I'm starting to see the world in a whole new, constantly shifting light.
Good.
But hold on a second. You said Cratylism was modern. How did this ancient Greek philosopher end up influencing contemporary thinkers?
Well, Cratylus's work, while not extensively preserved in its original form, was discussed and debated by later philosophers. These discussions, even if they were critical of his ideas, kept his name and his concepts alive, allowing them to be reinterpreted and applied in new contexts throughout history.
So it's like his ideas echoed through the corridors of time, finding new audiences and new interpretations along the way.
They did.
That's incredible. But is there any tangible evidence of Cratylus's influence beyond this Cratylism thing? Could he pop up in any unexpected places?
Absolutely. You might not believe this, but he's even been mentioned in poetry.
No way.
The Australian poet A.D. Hope wrote a book of essays titled The New Cratylus, where he explored the craft of poetry through the lens of Cratylus's ideas about language and flux.
Whoa, poetry. That's amazing. It seems like this ancient philosopher had a broader reach than we might initially think.
He certainly did, and it's not just poetry.
Well,
Even the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, a major figure in 20th century thought, mentions Cratylus in his work Totality and Infinity. This shows you the ripple effect of philosophical ideas, how they can transcend time, discipline, and even cultural boundaries.
this is also fascinating. It's like we're uncovering a hidden thread in the history of ideas, tracing the influence of this somewhat obscure figure through centuries of thought. So what can we learn from Cratylus today in our fast-paced, ever-changing world?
Cratylus reminds us that change is the only constant. Whether we're talking about the physical world, our own personal identities, or even the words we use to communicate, everything is in a continuous state of becoming. This has profound implications for how we approach knowledge, understanding, and even our own place in the universe.
It's a powerful reminder that we should always be open to new perspectives, to challenge our assumptions, and to embrace the fluidity of knowledge itself. It seems like Cratylus was way ahead of his time in so many ways.
He was indeed a visionary thinker. His ideas about language and change continue to resonate deeply with contemporary thought, and his influence can be felt across various fields, from philosophy and science to literature and art. It's a testament to the enduring power of ideas, how they can spark new insights and inspire new ways of thinking centuries after they were first conceived.
I'm completely with you on that. It's like Cratylus is still whispering his insights to us across the millennia, challenging us to see the world with fresh eyes and to embrace the ever-changing dance of existence.
And perhaps the most profound takeaway from all of this is the question that Cratylus leaves us with. If everything is constantly changing, even our own understanding of the world, then what does that mean for the pursuit of knowledge itself? Is knowledge a fixed point? Or is it also subject to the same forces of flux and transformation?
That's a really big question,
It is.
and one that we'll have to continue grappling with.
Yeah.
But for now, I think we need a moment to let all of these Cratylian ideas sink in. He's given us a lot to ponder, that's for sure. When we come back, I want to delve deeper into some of his specific ideas about language and the challenges of communication in a world of constant change. I'm really curious to unpack his theory of names and explore how it connects to this broader concept of flux.
I'm looking forward to that discussion. It's a rich and complex topic, one that has puzzled philosophers for centuries, and as we'll see, it still has a lot to teach us about the nature of language, meaning, and the very act of understanding itself.
Then let's take a moment to gather our thoughts, and we'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the fascinating world of Cratylus.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and philosophy of Cratylus. Before we pause to let those Cratylian ideas simmer, we were discussing how his radical notion of constant change has influenced thinkers throughout history, rippling out into fields like poetry and even the work of 20th century philosophers.
Exactly. And I have to say, I'm still reeling a bit from the idea that even language itself is in constant flux. But before we get too lost in the swirling vortex of change, I want to make sure I understand Cratylus's core beliefs. What were the fundamental principles of his philosophy?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the heart of Cratylus's most radical idea, the absolute and unrelenting nature of flux. Remember how he went beyond Heraclitus, who famously said you can't step into the same river twice? Well, Cratylus took it a step further, arguing that you couldn't even do it once.
Yeah, that part really blew my mind. But to be honest, I'm still struggling to grasp the full implications of that statement. Can you help me wrap my head around it?
Of course. Imagine dipping your toe into a flowing river. Cratylus would argue that even in that single instant, both you and the river are changing. The water is constantly moving, your cells are renewing, even the atoms that make up your foot are in a state of flux. Nothing remains truly static, not even for the briefest moment.
So it's not just that the river is different from one moment to the next, but that everything at every level is in a constant state of becoming, never truly being. It's a dizzying thought, isn't it?
It is indeed. And this concept of perpetual change, this unceasing flux, permeates all aspects of Cratylus's philosophy. It's not just about the physical world. He also applied this principle to language, which is where his theory of names comes into play. This was actually a central focus of Plato's dialogue Cratylus, where Socrates and Cratylus debate the nature of language.
Oh, right. You mentioned earlier that there's a whole modern school of thought called Cratylism, based on his theories of language. Can you elaborate on the connection between this idea of constant change and the way we use words?
Cratylus believed that name, the words we use for things, should accurately reflect the true nature of those things. But his radical twist was this: since everything is in flux, since the true nature of something is constantly shifting, then language can never truly capture its essence.
So if the essence of a thing is always changing, then the word we use for it is always playing catch-up, never quite able to pin down the ever-elusive reality it's trying to represent.
Exactly. This led Cratylus to a rather startling conclusion: that language itself is inherently flawed, unable to keep pace with the ceaseless dance of reality. He even suggested that true knowledge might be impossible to communicate through words.
Wow, that's a pretty radical statement. If he truly believed that, it makes you wonder how he even bothered to talk to people at all.
Well, there's a story, perhaps apocryphal, that Cratylus eventually stopped speaking altogether, choosing instead to communicate only through gestures. Some scholars believe this anecdote, whether true or not, highlights the depth of his conviction.
He went full-on mime. That's dedication to your philosophical principles. I can't help but admire his commitment, even if it seems a bit extreme.
It certainly makes you think.
I'm definitely feeling that sense of expanding horizons right now. Cratylus has really shaken up my assumptions about how language works. But let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about Cratylus's philosophy, but how did his ideas fare in the grand scheme of things? Did anyone actually agree with him? Did he have any followers, any disciples who carried on his legacy?
While Cratylus might not have had a massive following in his own time, his ideas definitely didn't just vanish into the ether. As we discussed earlier, there's an entire school of thought called Cratylism that draws inspiration from his work. And that's not even mentioning the countless thinkers who engaged with his ideas, even if they ultimately disagreed with his conclusions.
Right. You mentioned Cratylism earlier, but I'd love to hear more about it. What are some of its key principles, and how does it connect to Cratylus's original ideas?
Cratylism, as a modern philosophical movement, is essentially a reconstruction of Cratylus's original ideas, which we know primarily through Plato's writings. It focuses on the dynamic interplay between language and reality, exploring how the meaning of words is constantly evolving, mirroring the ever-shifting nature of the world itself.
So instead of viewing language as this static system of labels, Cratylism sees it as a fluid, adaptive process, constantly struggling to keep pace with the relentless dance of meaning.
Precisely. It's a fascinating perspective that resonates with contemporary theories of linguistics and semiotics, which also emphasize the fluid and context-dependent nature of meaning.
I can definitely see how Cratylus's ideas would appeal to linguists and semioticians, but I'm curious about the broader implications. How can his philosophy help us navigate the constant change we experience in our everyday lives?
That's a great question, and I think Cratylus's philosophy offers some valuable insights in that regard. His ideas can serve as a powerful reminder that nothing is truly static or fixed, not even our own identities or beliefs. This can be both liberating and challenging.
Liberating, because it frees us from rigid categories and dogmatic ways of thinking. Challenging, because it forces us to confront the inherent uncertainty and impermanence of everything around us.
You've hit the nail on the head. Cratylus encourages us to be more mindful of the present moment, to appreciate the ever-changing nature of reality, and to cultivate a mindset of openness and adaptability. He invites us to embrace the flow of life, recognizing that change is not something to be feared, but rather an essential part of the cosmic dance.
It's like he's urging us to let go of our need for absolute certainty, to surrender to the unknown, and to find joy in the constant unfolding of experience.
Exactly. And while Cratylus's ideas might seem abstract or even paradoxical at times, they offer a unique and thought-provoking perspective on the human condition.
I'm definitely feeling the profound vibes right now. Cratylus is giving me a lot to chew on, that's for sure.
And we haven't even delved into the specifics of how Cratylus's philosophy has manifested in later thinkers and creative works. For example, we touched upon the Australian poet A.D. Hope and his exploration of Cratylus's ideas in his book The New Cratylus.
Yes, and you mentioned the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas as well. I'm eager to explore those connections in more detail.
Well, then let's dive into those fascinating examples. Prepare to be amazed by how Cratylus's ancient wisdom continues to ripple through time, inspiring new forms of expression and pushing the boundaries of human thought.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Cratylus. We've been exploring his radical ideas about constant change and how they apply not only to the physical world, but also to language itself. Before the break, we were talking about how Cratylus's philosophy has echoed through time, influencing poets and philosophers alike.
Yes, and it's mind-boggling to think that a thinker from ancient Greece could still be sparking such vibrant conversations today.
It really speaks to the enduring power of ideas, how they can transcend time and cultural boundaries.
It does. And what's especially fascinating is how Cratylus's influence has extended beyond the realm of traditional philosophy, seeping into other areas of human thought and creativity.
You mentioned the Australian poet A.D. Hope and his engagement with Cratylus's ideas. That's not exactly where I'd expect to find a radical thinker from ancient Greece popping up.
It might seem like an unlikely pairing, but when you consider Cratylus's views on language, it starts to make sense. He believed that words were in a constant state of flux, always trying to catch up with the ever-changing nature of reality. This resonates deeply with the spirit of poetry, which is all about finding fresh and innovative ways to use language to push the boundaries of meaning and expression.
So in a way, poets are embracing that Cratylian idea of flux, playing with words, stretching their meanings, and trying to capture the dynamism of the world through language.
Precisely. And we see this beautifully illustrated in A.D. Hoke's book, The New Cratylus. He explores the art of poetry through the lens of Cratylus's philosophy, seeing in him a kindred spirit, someone who understood both the power and the limitations of language.
It's as if Cratylus is this hidden muse for poets, inspiring them to break free from rigid conventions and embrace the fluidity of language.
He certainly seems to have had that effect. And his influence isn't limited to poetry. We also see it in the work of philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas, a towering figure in 20th century thought. He grappled with Cratylus's ideas about flux and the inherent limitations of language in his own philosophical explorations, demonstrating how these ancient concepts can continue to challenge and provoke new insights centuries later.
It's remarkable how these threads of thought weave their way through history, connecting thinkers across vast spans of time and distance. So what does this all mean for us today? How can Cratylus's philosophy, born in the bustling intellectual climate of ancient Athens, help us navigate our own fast-paced, ever-changing world?
Cratylus's most enduring legacy might be his invitation to embrace change, to see it not as a threat, but as an inherent and essential aspect of reality. In a world that often craves stability and certainty, his philosophy reminds us that everything is in flux: our personal identities, our social structures, even our understanding of the universe itself.
It's a humbling realization, but also strangely empowering. Humbling because it reminds us that we can never fully grasp or control the world around us. Empowering because it frees us from clinging to rigid beliefs and outdated ways of thinking.
Exactly. By acknowledging the fluidity of reality, we open ourselves up to new possibilities, new perspectives, new ways of being in the world. We become more adaptable, more resilient, more in tune with the rhythms of life.
It's as if Cratylus is whispering across the millennia, urging us to let go of our need for absolute certainty, to embrace the unknown, and to dance with the ever-changing currents of existence.
He is indeed. And in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, that message might be more relevant now than ever.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a renewed sense of wonder and curiosity after this deep dive into the world of Cratylus. It's amazing how a figure who lived over 2,000 years ago can still offer such profound and timely insights.
It is, and it's a testament to the enduring power of philosophical inquiry. By engaging with ideas from the past, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world we inhabit. We discover that the questions that preoccupied thinkers centuries ago are often the same questions that we grapple with today.
And that's the beauty of taking a deep dive into these topics. We've only just scratched the surface of Cratylus's fascinating world, but I hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring the rich tapestry of philosophical thought.
I hope so too.
So until next time, keep those minds open, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.